Hi everybody, I'm Rebecca Kolls and this is Rebecca's Garden on DVD. We've put together some of the best stories that we've had over the years to bring you this collection of getting started in your garden. Hopefully it's going to help you and inspire you. Hope you enjoy the show, and until next time, keep those hands dirty. You know, every year I like to get organized in the garden, so I start off by making a garden calendar. I write down all the important dates so it reminds me of things I need to do in the garden. Now, the first thing you need to do is write down the most important dates, your first and last frost. And of course, this will vary depending on where you live. For me, the last frost is usually around May 10th and the first frost around October 13th. Now, everything you do in the garden is based on these dates. For example, you can plant your cool season vegetables and flowers 3 weeks prior to your last frost, whereas your warm season vegetables and flowers can be planted 2 weeks after your last frost. So once you get those dates in, then you can go month by month and just fill in the gaps. January and February, I remind myself to order seeds and summer bulbs, start my seeds indoors, clean and sharpen my tools. And don't forget, February 26th, my birthday. March, April, and May, there's plenty of reminders like amending the soil, divide perennials, and of course plant. And in the good old summertime, can't forget to deadhead, sharpen the mower blade, and don't forget to control those aphids with insecticidal soap. Now in September, I have to remember to fertilize the lawn and dig up the summer bulbs. Write that down. And speaking of bulbs, in the fall, don't forget to plant your tulips, save your leaves for mulching, and make sure you clean up your garden before winter arrives. Now, once you've filled in the dates, use the calendar as a journal. Write down things that go on in the garden on a daily basis. That way, next year, you'll be ahead of the game. It's that time of the year. You're thumbing through the latest garden catalog. Now, picture this, if you will. Perennials, lots of them. You find exactly what you're looking for. It's the right plant, the right color, the right amount of sun, and then suddenly you realize you've entered the wrong zone. So what is all this zone stuff? And is it really important? Yes, it is. Because knowing your zone will help determine whether or not a plant will survive in your winter weather conditions. You can find out what zone you're in on a cold hardiness zone map like this one here. It was developed by the United States Department of Agriculture and the National Weather Service. It divides North America into 11 hardiness zones. Zone 1 is the coldest, Zone 11 is the warmest. Each zone represents a 10-degree difference in an average minimum winter temperature. So let's say you live in Zone 5. That means you can choose plants that will endure winters with temperatures as cold as 10 to 20 below. Knowing your zone is extremely helpful when shopping for plants. Just check the plant's label. It should list which zone the plant will grow best in. Now, if your garden is located on a hill, steep slope, or in a valley, then you may have what we call a microclimate, where the temperature is actually affected. So knowing your zone is a good place to start, but in these situations, you may have to do a little experimenting with some of the plants to figure out what will grow well in your garden. Some other factors that help determine a plant's survival are soil type, rainfall, daytime temperature, day length, wind, humidity, and of course heat, which can be deadly. How a plant will survive in extreme heat is something that the cold hardiness map doesn't tell you. Just recently, the American Horticultural Society has developed a new map based on heat. The plant heat zone map is divided into 12 zones according to the number of days when temperatures typically rise above 86 degrees. That's the point at which many plants suffer. This map is especially useful for gardeners in the warm southern and western climates. But for all gardeners, using both the ratings from this map and the cold hardiness zone map make it possible to choose plants that thrive, not merely survive. Because the heat tolerance zone map is so new, it's just now starting to show up on some of the plant labels. It may take a few years before it actually takes off. So remember, before you buy any plants, you must know your zone. Most garden books and nurseries will have maps to help you out. So entering the plant zone will be easier than you ever thought. If you've ever been shopping for gardening tools, you know there's a lot out there, all with claims that you must have them. Today I'm going to show you how to get started with just the basics. Every gardener needs a good shovel and a good rake. The first thing you want to look at are the handles. Keep this tip in mind. The longer the handle, the less stressful it's going to be on your back. Now the hardware is very important. This one has an open shank. The more open the shank is, the more likely that water and mud can get to the wood and cause rotting. The blade should be thick. Look at the footstep. This one is curved. That's going to be harder on the foot. Go for ones that have a 90-degree angle. Look for the same criteria on the hardware of the rake, but also look for one that has a flat back. This way, not only can we use the rake as a weeder, cultivator, and aerator, we can turn it over and level out the soil in the garden. Another great basic garden tool is the trowel. They come in all shapes and sizes, but to start with, go with a wider blade, and you gotta buy stainless steel. They won't rust, bend, or break. Now this one has a wooden handle. That means more maintenance in the fall, but you can also buy plastic and cushion handles as well. Another must-have are pruning shears. I prefer the bypass pruning shears, just like kitchen scissors. This won't crush the plant, plus you can have the blade sharpened as well. Definitely worth the money. So there you have it. These are the basics to get you started. And then you may want to start adding to your collection. You may want to add something like this gadget here. Do we need a license for this? So here's the deal. You worked like a dog in your garden last year. You picked the right plants, you put them in the right place, you fed, you watered them, and still they did not look very good. So what's the problem? Well, the answer might be in your soil. Healthy soil is the key to a successful garden, and just because it looks good doesn't necessarily mean it is. It's always a good idea to have your soil tested. There are many kits that are available, but I prefer to stop by the local county extension service and pick up a little bag like this. This is the kit. On the back there are instructions that tell you what you need to do. Basically, they tell you to grab a small sample of soil from 5 different locations in your garden. Then just mix the samples together and then we'll fill up the bag. Then seal it up and send it away for a test. And what you'll get in return is this soil test report card.
It measures the soil's fertility and shows which nutrients are missing. It also measures the soil's pH. The scale runs from 0 to 10. Anything between 6 and 7 is considered ideal. As you can see, mine is running a little acidic at 5.8, which means I need to add lime.
The test will also tell you what other amendments you need to add to make your soil better. Healthy soil means a healthy garden.
I think if people knew just how easy it was to plant and grow a vegetable garden, more people would be doing it. Plus, once you sink your teeth into something homegrown, you'll know why it's worth any effort that you put into it. The first thing you need to do is pick out your location. Vegetables love sunshine, at least 6 hours a day. They like well-amended soil, and they like well-drained soil. A few weeks ago, I tilled in the 3 magic ingredients: compost, cow manure, and peat moss. Let it settle. Now I'm ready to go. Now you just have to decide what to plant. Think about what you and your kids like to eat. Also, talk to your garden center or local county extension service and find out what vegetables thrive in your area. Some of the easiest to grow no matter where you live include beans, carrots, tomatoes, cucumbers, or squash.
When you plant your vegetables, it's always a good idea to plant them according to their family. And also, you don't want to put them in the same spot that they grew year after year. You can see my garden has been divided in quadrants. That way I can move my crops around. It's called crop rotation, and it really works because what happens, a lot of plants actually take nutrients out of the soil while some plants put nutrients back into the soil. So the plants that take out get moved, the plants that put in come back in their spot. Plus, it's excellent because it helps prevent the spread of many soil-borne diseases.
For example, in the first quadrant, we'll plant vining crops like cucumbers and squash. Building a trellis for these vegetables can help save a lot of space. Next to it will be the nightshade family, including tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant. The third quadrant will house members of the brassicas family, like broccoli and Brussels sprouts. And in the fourth quadrant, the root vegetables, like beets, carrots, radishes, and onions. Make a list of where you plant your vegetables this year. That will help you play musical chairs in the garden next year. There are two groups of vegetables, your cool season crops and the warm season crops. Anything that falls in the cool season can be planted before the last frost. They include your radishes, spinach, beets, carrots, any of your lettuces, broccoli, and cauliflower. The warm season crops can be planted after the last frost. They include tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, any of your vining crops, and corn. Now, most of your cool season crops will be started from seed, and keep in mind that most people plant their seeds too deeply, and that's why they're not successful. Each seed will be planted at a different depth. You can read the directions or just remember this rule that typically the seed will be buried 3 to 4 times as deep as its diameter. So something as large as this beet will be planted about 1/2 inch deep, and something as small as this lettuce will simply be pressed into the soil. As far as your warm season crops are concerned, you can start them from seed indoors, but you do have to start early. The benefit, however, is that you get a wide variety of plants to choose from. Now, if you stop by your garden center, you're going to get what looks like this. This is called a transplant. Planting these is simple. All you need to do is dig a hole as deep as the container, pop it in, and you're set to go. Now, I want to show you a tip with tomatoes. We've got 2 plants here. This one looks great just planting it as is. This one's a little long and leggy, so let me show you a technique I learned that will help grow a sturdier plant that will give us more tomatoes. Now, the planting technique is different. Instead of a hole, we're going to dig a trench. Then take the plant, gently remove it from its container, and you'll want to loosen up the roots so that they'll spread out. And then we want to remove the leaves all the way up to the top, so just pinch them off. Okay, once you get the leaves picked off, then what you want to do is take the tomato and lay it horizontally into the trench, like so. Then we'll cover it up, leaving the end, and we'll slowly bend this up. Place a stake on the back side of it to help support it. And that's all there is to it. Now just sit back and wait a couple of months and you'll be tasting tons of tomatoes. Now keep in mind, with all young transplants come the invaders like cutworm. This is a garden pest that can wrap around young stems and saw them down. To prevent this, cut out a tuna can, put it over the top of the plant, and sink it down at about 1 inch deep. Or you can use nails. Carefully place them around the stem. It's a great cutworm barrier. And if rabbits are a problem, simply reach in your kitchen cupboard and pull out your cayenne pepper. Sprinkle this around the base of your plant. The rabbits will take one whiff of this and they won't be dining here any longer. Now just keep your vegetable garden well watered and be consistent with it. Then in no time, you'll be enjoying the fruits of your labor. Or would that be vegetables of your labor? Who doesn't want a beautiful garden bursting with blooms? Well, it's pretty easy. Just keep the plants healthy and you need to keep them fed. There are a lot of different fertilizers available, but which one do you use and how much does the plant need? Well, what you need to do is divide your plants into 2 different categories. You have your annuals and your perennials. That's important to know because each of them have different nutritional needs. Now, because annuals bloom continuously, you need to find a fertilizer that will promote those blooms. So be sure to find a water-soluble fertilizer. The plant takes that up quickly, and one that's high in phosphorus. How do you know? Well, take a look at the 3 numbers on the front here. You want the middle number to be the highest. This is phosphorus. That promotes bloom growth. All you need to do is take the powder and mix it with water and pour it over the plant. To prevent burning the plant's roots, less is more. I always measure the fertilizer at half strength, dilute it with the recommended amount of water, and apply it every 2 to 3 weeks during the growing season. The water-soluble fertilizer can be a great little snack for perennials, but really to get them up and started, you need a granular fertilizer, an all-purpose fertilizer. That means the numbers in front are equal, like a 10-10-10. All you need to do is simply scratch this fertilizer around the base of the plant one time in the spring, and then a month later, water it in, and your plant should do just fine. And don't forget, there's a lot of different organic fertilizers that you can use for your flowers. Just remember the same rules apply. Water soluble like fish emulsion, great for the annuals, where the granular varieties are better for the perennials.
When spring arrives, everything is in bloom at the garden center. People are buzzing around, loaded with questions. They're trying to pick the perfect plant. Should they use this pot or that pot? Should they seed or should they sod? A lot of questions out there. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to give you some shopping secrets to keep you ahead of the game. If you're looking for ways to beat the crowd, take advantage of a rainy day. The aisles are empty. And even if it's not raining, you can beat the crowds by trying to do your shopping during the week. If you have to shop on the weekend, set your alarm clocks because you'll want to start early. To bloom or not to bloom, that's the big question in the garden center. Which one do you choose? Well, if you do have a choice, go for the one without blooms. This is a younger plant and will probably transplant better into your garden. Just be sure to read the label before you leave. You don't want to walk away with a pink plant when you thought it was orange. Now, long legs might be in for models, but stout is what it's all about when it comes to flowers and plants. You want to make sure your plants are nice and compact. These are a little leggy. Can you see how much taller they are? That means that they are stressed, so you'll have a better chance with the smaller ones. Now, who out there doesn't want to save some money? Look at it this way. The more you save, the more you can buy. So here are some ideas on cutting your garden costs. First of all, take a look at the hanging baskets and the containers. These are already designed with a variety of different flowers. They come with a hefty price tag. This is $50, this one's $60. Well, here's my idea. Simply cheat. Copy the idea. Take a look at what's already growing. Take your cart, go through the garden center, and pick out the same exact flowers. Take them home, design your own. You've just saved 50%. Now, when it comes to buying single packets or flats, how about saving $3 to $5 if you buy the flat? Another way to save money, buy lawn seed in bulk. Many garden centers offer specially mixed seeds specific to your location with varying light conditions. It's a guarantee your grass will grow even in the shadiest of conditions. And finally, now I've given you all these tips to buy healthy plants, save some money. Now, to keep your plants alive, you're going to have to water them and keep them fed. So before you leave the checkout stand, be sure to pick up some fertilizer. Your plants will appreciate a feeding every 2 to 3 weeks. Oh man, it's starting to get cold, and if you're like me, you're probably in denial with winter setting in, especially here in Minnesota. If you brought some of your plants outdoors, now's the time to react, because one nip of frost, these guys are goners. But before you bring them indoors, there's a couple of things you need to know about. Come with me, we'll talk about it. So you bring your plant indoors, and like most of us, you're going to set it right next to the plants already indoors, right? Wrong. Bad mistake, and here's the reason why. You've got to remember that this guy has been out all summer long, so he's been exposed to all kinds of insects and pests. And if the plant comes in infected, guess what? They are going to jump from this plant to the one plants you've already had indoors. So how do you prevent that? It's very easy. It just takes a couple of steps. First of all, examine the plant to make sure that you visually can't see any insects or any kind of pest. And if you do, and I always do this as a precaution anyway, I always spray down the plant with an insecticidal soap, making sure I cover the entire top of the leaf as well as underneath, because that's where they like to hide. That's where they lay their eggs. Then take the plant and isolate it for a couple of weeks. That's all. And then that way, if there are any bugs on the plant, the insecticidal soap will take care of it. It won't infect this plant. Another thing you need to remember, we brought these indoors. They won't need as much water as we go into the cooler part of the season. And you know what? They need to sleep. So cut off the fertilizer. They'll do just fine. And you know what? You'll have lots of green to get rid of those winter blues. Well, as you can imagine, I spend a lot of my free time in the garden centers. In fact, so much of it that people come up and ask me questions. So I got to thinking, the garden centers are a gold mine of information that a lot of people don't know about. Don't be intimidated. I know you got a lot of questions. Well, today, Rebecca's Have No Fear Guide to the Garden Center is here. I'll give you some tips on shopping, and I'll show you how to get the answers to those weird questions you need to know. When it comes to buying vegetables, remember, bigger is not always better. In fact, take a look at these plants. Which one are you going to buy? A lot of people are going to go with the ones with the pepper to get a head start. Wrong. This was actually a stress plant. In fact, this one has grown out of its container, so this one will not do as well as this one if you plant them at the same time. Keep that in mind. The same rule applies to tomato plants. Go for the small, compact variety, nice and stocky. This one will do fine. And if it's slightly yellowed, don't worry about it. A shot of nitrogen, this one will take off beautifully. When it comes to buying trees and shrubs, use some common sense. If they don't look good, don't buy them because they're probably not. Here's a tip for trees. You want to make sure that the trunk is very nice and straight. Stay away from anything that has any deep scars or nicks. And look at the branches. Make sure they're balanced all the way around the tree. Now, if you look at this trunk, you may say this looks damaged, when in fact this is the way the trunk is supposed to be. It's exfoliating bark. But if you're not sure, ask somebody at the garden center. Now here's a plant you probably want to stay away from. This tree has a lot of spots in the leaves, so why spend money and take the risk on this tree when we can have a healthy one? So remember, common sense, that's the key. If it doesn't look good, don't buy it. The same rule applies to houseplants. Let's check those out. So knowing that, which one of these plants do you choose? Obviously, this one is a dying one. But you know, as a kid, this is a funny story. I used to go in the garden center. They used to have an intensive room. And for about a quarter, I could buy plants like this when the leaves were actually falling off. It'd be a big goal of mine to take it home and try to bring it back to life. Obviously, a lot of them didn't make it, but some did. It took a long time to finally bring them back to life. And I'm sure you don't have time to do that, so why waste your time on something like this? Now, when you look for a healthy plant, it's real simple. Of course, it's got to look good on top, but take a peek at the roots. They should be nice, creamy white in color, very full. Now this one you can see is a little pot bound. The roots are going around the bottom. That's an indication that this one will need to be potted up in a bigger pot eventually in order to make it nice and healthy. But this is a really nice plant. When you get it home, I know you're going to want to feed this and fertilize it, but don't. This has a time-release fertilizer in it, and that's the case in most garden center plants. So wait about 3 months before you fertilize. And the one thing, don't overwater. Too many people overwater, the plant dies. Most plants prefer to be on the drier side. If you're not sure, make sure you check with the people at the garden center. Where's the information? Information, information. Information. Who's got the information? Where's the information? Oh, just the person I'm looking
Rebecca.
for. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks.
I have tons of questions.
Hopefully I have tons of answers for you.
Well, I can see you are literally armed with books, resources, all kinds of pamphlets and handouts.
If I don't have the answer personally, I have several places where I can consult. We have horticulturists on staff. We have all of these books available for all of us to help out our customers.
So what's the weirdest question somebody's asked you?
Well, I think it was the time the gal came in with her little tomato tag, and on the picture it showed red tomatoes, and she was quite concerned that something was wrong because all of hers were green.
Oh, good. Then I don't feel so bad. Because see, I've got this plant. I mean, I'm supposed to know all this, but I was kind of embarrassed to bring this in. It has these black spots. Is this black spot?
Actually, that's exactly what it's called. It's black spot. And we're going to need a garden fungicide to get it taken care of. You have to remove all of these leaves that are affected. Make sure you don't leave them on the soil. Make sure you don't put them in your mulch pile. We'll get our garden fungicide and spray it from the bottom of the plant.
Okay.
Because that's where the moisture hits the soil, bounces back up, and that's where you get your fungus
You really
from.
know your stuff, don't you?
Well, I know this particular thing, but I don't know all the answers. But like I said, we have care sheets available. We have books.
Now, is this a big thing sweeping the country?
You know, I think it is. Everyone's getting back to nature now. A lot of people want to grow their own fruits, vegetables, because they feel it's a little healthier.
And this is all free.
And this is all free.
So think of that. When you go to the garden centers, don't be intimidated. If you have the questions, come in loaded with the questions. You do your shopping, you get your plants, your tools, supplies. Why not get those questions answered? And you know what? If you have some diseased plants like this, bring them in a bag. People like Lynn will be glad to help you out. Then you can go home and keep that green craze going. Now here's a tip if you want color and blooms all summer long. Annuals can't be beat. I'm going to show you 5 very easy annuals to grow that don't require a lot of attention. Now for sunny locations, one of my favorite annuals is alyssum. This is called sweet alyssum. It's white and it smells so nice and sweet. This will grow about 4 inches high and it will spread into nice soft mounds. It's excellent for borders, window boxes, or containers.
Now, if you think you can't grow flowers, marigolds will prove you wrong. They are truly one of the easiest annuals to grow. They come in a wide variety of sizes from 6 to 36 inches, colors usually yellow and orange. Now, if you want to encourage more blooms, make sure you pinch off their heads after you plant them, and they do like sunny spots. Another great annual for sunny locations, even part shade, is the petunia. And the best part about it, there are enough colors to match any color scheme. And now there's so many new varieties that you can find one that will creep, crawl, or cascade. Perfect for any garden. Now, to brighten up a shady spot, check out impatiens. They come in a wide variety of color. They'll grow 6 to 36 inches. The one thing they do require is a moist, fertile soil. The vivid foliage from the coleus make this a great flower for the shade garden. It'll grow about 36 inches tall as long as you keep it pinched. And again, with all the annuals, make sure you plant them as deeply as they were in the container. Keep them watered, feed them once a month with an all-purpose fertilizer, and you're set to go all summer long. For those of you who would like a beautiful garden but don't want all the work, perennials might just be the answer. These are plants that bloom year after year. And in my left hand, I have what I think are the top 10 easiest perennials to grow. These plants were selected based on their disease resistance, their hardiness, and their low maintenance. So get ready, I'm going to show you the toughest of the bunch. The first perennial that won't let you down is the old-fashioned iris. I'm sure most of you had grandparents who had these growing in their backyard, and not much has changed since then. All the flowers basically look alike, and they come in a wide array of color. Some are bearded, some are not. The blooming period is about 2 weeks in the spring, but not to worry because the lance-shaped foliage is excellent filler for the garden all summer long. Now, planting your iris is different than planting most perennials. It's very important that this fleshy bulb here, called the rhizome, is slightly above the soil surface. So dig your hole, hold the plant, bring in the soil. You may have to toggle the plant back and forth, making sure that the tip of the rhizome is exposed. The peony is another classic late spring blooming perennial with large masses of petals in shades of pink, white, and red. This is a perfect perennial for the cutting garden. They grow best in full sun with well-drained soil and may take a couple of years to get good blooms. One of America's most popular perennials for the shade garden is the hosta. These are nearly impossible to kill. They come in a wide variety of color, shape, size, and texture. Some are a couple of inches tall, while others can grow upwards of 3 feet. They're excellent for borders and lining pathways, and here's a good tip. If the leaves are blue-green, that means they won't be able to tolerate as much sunshine. However, if they're yellow-green in color, they can take on more sun. A stilbe is another perennial made for the shade. The flowers are soft, feathery plumes in colors of white, pinks, and reds. They bloom in mid to late summer. The same rules apply when planting a stilbe as with other perennials in containers. First of all, they all need well-drained soil. And because once we plant these, we don't want to disturb their root system, it's important to enrich the soil before you get started. Of course, using the 3 magic ingredients. That's peat moss, cow manure, and compost. Once you've done that, dig your hole and gently remove the flower from its container. It's important to try to tease apart. That may mean tearing the root system at the bottom. That's going to allow the roots to spread. Drop it in the hole, making sure you plant it as deeply as it was in the container. Cover it up. Keep it watered and fertilized about once a month and you should be set. Now, the best time to plant your perennials is in the spring, but if you keep your eyes open, in the fall you can get some great bargains and they'll transplant just as well. The 5th perennial on my list is monarda, also called bee balm. The bees love buzzing around the pom-pom-like flowers which bloom in the summer through early fall. This is a great plant for sun or part shade, and it's deer resistant. One look at the flower from the bleeding heart and you can see where this perennial gets its name. Bleeding hearts are an excellent candidate for the shaded garden or even a little bit of sunshine. The flowers line up on a single stem which gracefully arch over the foliage. Now, typically it blooms in the spring, but if you get the fernleaf variety, you can get blooms all summer long. The flowers are pink, white, and red, and this plant will grow to the height of about 1 to 3 feet. Daylilies are one of the hardiest perennials you can grow. They have large trumpet-shaped blooms that come in many colors. They bloom all summer long, but each flower only lasts one day. This is a great perennial for hot, dry conditions. Now, one of my favorite perennials is the delphinium, and although these don't look like much now, when they bloom early summer, the stately, tall spikes of color, typically in bloom, look fabulous. And a nice tip about these, if you deadhead the blooms shortly after they fade, you'll get a second flush of color late summer. Yarrow and purple coneflower are my last two perennial picks. Both are excellent for hot, dry, and poor soil conditions. So there you have it, my top 10 easy-to-grow perennials. Now, one thing to keep in mind, you're not going to see some quick results. In fact, the first year, perennials sleep. The second year, they creep. And the third year, they leap with color. So be patient.
Usually by mid to late summer, the garden is in full bloom. Hopefully you've had enough sunshine and rain to keep it looking great. But as you know, summer can take its toll on a garden, sometimes making it look tired and ragged. Well, not to worry, because I've got some great tips that will help keep your flower garden beautiful.
Typically, most flower gardens need about an inch of water a week. You can put out a rain gauge to get a good measurement or just recycle an old tuna can. Now, if Mother Nature is not supplying you with enough water, you're going to have to do it yourself. It's important to remember not to water from above the plants. Number one, you lose a lot of water to evaporation, plus you also set the plants up for possible problems down the road. You want to direct that water right down to the soil surface. This will get it to the root system. It's best to water your plants in the morning hours or do it in the late afternoon. You just don't want to do it during the evening hours because that sets up the problems for fungus. Now, everyone hates to weed, but now more than ever in the hottest part of the summer, your garden really needs it. Because believe it or not, weeds actually steal water and nutrients from the surrounding plants. So you're going to have to get out there and yank them out. A little twist and pull.
Now, if you want to keep the weeds out, add a layer of mulch. I have found that if you spread about a layer that's 3 to 4 inches thick, that's usually enough to block out the sunshine to keep the weeds from ever coming back so you don't have to weed. Plus, the mulch does a couple of things. It helps retain moisture so we don't have to water as much, and it also cools the soil. And once you get it down, I think you'll like it because it does add a decorative touch, and there's so many mulches to choose from.
Another tip for keeping your garden looking great is to keep it cleaned up with some pruners. Now, your perennials, typically these are flowers that bloom only once during the growing season. So as the flowers start dying back, go ahead and pull them off. But something like these daylilies that bloom in clusters, wait until the entire cluster is done blooming, and then you can cut the entire stem and enjoy the foliage. Now, with perennials like Monarda, don't worry about picking off the blooms. Just wait until they're all spent and go ahead and remove the entire plant by cutting the stems down. Now, if you're concerned about bare spots, don't be. The Monarda plant will send up shoots of green. When fertilizing your perennials, it's best to scratch in an all-purpose 10-10-10 fertilizer once a month, or to encourage more blooms, pick a fertilizer high in phosphorus. That's the middle number. For your annuals, a water-soluble fertilizer like Miracle Grow once a month will keep them looking great. Now, to keep your annuals like this Nicotiana blooming all summer long, it's important to deadhead. That means removing the spent blooms, because if you leave the dead blooms on the plant, it sets seed. And once the plant sets seed, it slows flower production down. With annuals like Lobelia, Alyssum, and Pansies, if you snip them down mid-summer, you'll get a second burst of color through the fall season. Now, hopefully, if you can follow these simple maintenance suggestions, it will help you have a garden that looks its best and will be the envy of the neighborhood.
Have you ever noticed that when spring arrives and the temperatures warm up, suddenly neighbors you haven't seen all winter long come rushing out of their homes almost as if the gates are open? They're all anxious to get their luscious lawns in shape. And you know what? You see it all. They're seeding, weeding, fertilizing, power raking, aerating, they're blowing, trimming, and of course mowing. And sometimes they're doing it all in one day. Not a good idea. There are some definite do's and don'ts when it comes to spring lawn care that you should know. Now, before you get started doing anything, you need to make a couple of decisions. First of all, do you want to control the crabgrass, or do you want to lay down new lawn seed? Because you can't do both. The crabgrass controller will actually prevent the lawn seed from germinating. So, let's say you have crabgrass and you want to control that. Well, you need to attack it early in the spring before it gets out of control. You can use a crabgrass preventer, or for an organic alternative, try corn gluten. Whatever you choose, use a spreader to apply it evenly. The best time to do this is when the daffodils are blooming. And remember, spring rains will help activate the ingredients. Now, if you decide to start a new lawn, or in this case patch an old one, you need to start by loosening up the soil. Just use a rake. Okay, now we're ready for the seed. Make sure whatever you get that it's top quality. You can save a lot of money and buy the seed in bulk, or for more money you can get a product that I really like. It's seed that's mixed with shredded newspaper. This stuff really works. Let me show you how. Apply a thin layer of the lawn patch, making sure you cover up all the open spaces, and then water thoroughly. Now, whether you use the lawn patch or the seed, it's real important that you keep your new bed moist at all times until the seed germinates, which in some cases may take up to 3 weeks. And also, you don't want to mow the grass until it reaches a height of 4 inches. And speaking of mowing, before you take your machine to the turf, it's real important to get it cleaned up and ready for the season. Start by flipping the mower over. You'll want to give the underside a good spring cleaning, and in some cases you may have to pull out a chisel to remove some of the junk. It's also a good idea to keep your blade sharpened. In fact, 3 sharpenings a season will do the trick. Otherwise, your grass will get split ends. Don't you hate when that happens? When you do mow, don't cut off more than 1/3 of the grass at one time, and keep the height about 2.5 to 3 inches. Also, change your mowing pattern. This helps prevent soil compaction, which inhibits the growth of grass. Watering is also an important part of spring lawn care. It's much better to give your lawn a deep soaking once a week rather than a light sprinkling 3 to 4 times a week. Watering early in the morning is best, and keep in mind most lawns need about 1 inch of water a week. Spring is also the time to go on weed patrol. Ha ha! Gotcha! Now, since I don't like to use herbicides, I try to find tools that might help get to the root of the problem, and I have found the Weed Hound always does the trick. The biggest mistake people make with their grass is that they fertilize it to death, literally. The best time to feed your lawn is with 2 applications in the fall. The only reason you would fertilize in the spring is if you miss the fall application. And don't worry if you think your lawn's not getting fed enough, because every time you mow your grass, if you leave the clippings on, you're giving it free nitrogen. And that's the best organic fertilizer you can get. There are some definite don'ts when it comes to spring lawn care. Don't aerate. It can damage the soil because the soil is just too moist in the spring. Plus, aeration opens up areas for weed seeds to germinate. And forget about power raking or dethatching. This is just too hard on the new sensitive spring roots. And finally, in the early spring when your soil is still soggy, try to keep your kids from playing on the grass, and for heaven's sakes, don't be dragging your wheelbarrow across it either. Hopefully these tips will make your neighbors green with envy. Well, today we're at Home Depot. We've got a great project lined up. In fact, we're going to teach you how to build a very simple window box, and the best part, it will cost around $30. And it sounds like class begins right now.
Rebecca Kolls to lumber.
I'm right here. Well, we're very lucky. Phil Shores, who's a wood craftsman, has been teaching woodworking for many, many years. He also works here at Home Depot. He's going to help us pick out the supplies for our window box. Of course, the first most important element is the wood. And I know a lot of different choices. We have oak, pine, cherry, mahogany. Which one do we need for the window box?
All right, what you want to choose is cedar because it's an exterior wood. It's been used for shingles, siding for many, many years, and it's very weatherable.
Now, for this box, how much wood would we need?
All right, for the particular box that you're thinking about, we will need about 12 feet of a 1x10 because that's about the size of the plants that you wanted to use.
Okay.
Because that is an element in considering how big to make the box, is what kind of plants you're going to put in it. And your plant choice tells us this.
All right, so we'll start with this. Now, is this the only wood we need?
We will need one 1x2 for a little bit of trim.
There are 2 other items you need for this project: screws that are weather coated and a couple of brackets. Now this is the window box that we're going to end up with. We applied it to this nice little window, which isn't a real thing, but you did a good job putting this up for us so we could get the whole effect out of it. Now tell me some of the things that we have to consider before we even get started cutting the wood. I see you've measured this. Is there any rule of thumb that you like to follow?
Well, rule of thumb that I like to follow, Rebecca, is I like to measure the width of the window and then add about 3 inches
On each side?
On each side, and then
Okay.
balance it so that it doesn't look out of place.
Right.
Because you want it to have nice aesthetic value.
Right. Too much, it would look like a big mustache. Too small, Charlie Chaplin might like it.
Great.
And the brackets underneath, that's for support.
Support.
Okay.
And it can be done either way. You can either attach it straight to the structure, or if you like a little extra decor,
Yeah,
the bracketing
well,
works
that's
nice.
very Okay, so here's something you're not going to believe. Tell us how long it took you to make this.
Less than 30 minutes.
Can I do it in 30 minutes?
We'll try.
Start the watch. Let's go.
Okay.
To begin, we cut 3 36-inch pieces from our 1x10, which will make up the bottom, the front, and the back of the box. Then with the leftover wood, we measured and cut the 2 end pieces. Once those were cut, we took the 1x2 piece of wood and measured the trim for the box. 1 for the front and 2 for the sides.
Okay, so we've got the pieces cut, only 8 pieces, so it's been very simple so far, but now we got to put it together.
All right, let's get rid of the small pieces and we'll put the box together now.
Okay.
All right, let's set these up. We'll put the decorative side out,
Which is the rough side.
which is the rough. All right, so that we make sure that this is going to fit. Now, I got a little cheater here.
Ooh, I like that.
These clamps should help hold the wood together. Then using a hammer, we tap the pieces into place.
What we'll do now is we will pre-drill our holes for the screws because cedar splinters easily and you don't want to crack anything.
Okay.
So we pick out a drill bit that will act as a pilot
Okay, same
for us.
size.
Same size.
All right, how many
Okay.
screws?
Well, we'll start out and we'll think about 3.
With the holes pre-drilled, we were ready for the real thing. Phil offered a couple of good pointers for this step. Drill the screws until they're flush with the wood and space them out across the ends and the length of the box.
All right, next important stage here is to put water drain holes. And we'll
course.
use a spade bit, which works.
Okay.
And you know what? Since you like to drill, you can put these anywhere.
Oh, great.
We drilled 3 holes in our window box to offer plenty of good drainage. Next, it was time for the trim. Now the key here is keeping each piece flush with the inside edge of the box. Then we just drilled the trim in place using the same method as before.
Okay, last step, installing the brackets. And because this is going on the outside, we really aren't too concerned about where we're going to put them. So we just put them so it's going to give us the most strength. In this case, let's just set these at 5, like so. And we'll put one here.
With both brackets attached, the only thing left was to hang our box below the window.
Okay. All right, we'll kind of size this up for location. We'll see if we've got it kind of where we'd like it. There we go. Now it's just a matter of putting in our screws.
Okay, we're done. So we'll put some paint or stain on this. It'll last a lifetime. Looks, oh, stop the clock. How'd we do?
16 minutes.
16 minutes. Way
Awesome
to go.
job.
A
Way to
great
go.
project. Easy to do. A box that will grow on you. Bruschetta or bruschetta. No matter how you say it, this is a great tasting appetizer that tastes as if it came straight from the garden. It's very easy. I think one you'll like. Let me show you. Now I should start out by telling you that with this recipe, there are no measurements. You just mix and taste as you go, which is a great way to do a recipe. I start off by chopping tomatoes. I like to use meaty tomatoes like the Roma, and in the middle of winter you can use these grape tomatoes which have such a sweet, delicate flavor, taste very, very fresh. Chop them up, put them in a bowl, and then on top of that I'm going to drizzle some olive oil and balsamic vinegar. Just keep in mind, 3 parts oil to 1 part vinegar. Then add shredded basil, coarsely chopped Greek olives, and capers. And now we're ready for some chopped garlic, about a clove or two. And finally, we'll add crumbled blue cheese and mix that well. Now, when you're ready to serve this, I like to put the tomato mixture in a separate bowl, surrounded with cut pieces of baguette bread. That way the guests can serve themselves and then the bread won't get soggy. If you want to toast the bread, go ahead and do it. I like to use mine just nice and fresh. And I'm here to tell you, once your guests taste this appetizer, it's one they won't forget. Whew, that was a lot of information. Hope you got all that down, and I want to see those hands. Well, like I said, if you've enjoyed this DVD, be sure to look for the others. I'm Rebecca Kolls. Until next time, keep those little hands dirty.